Chapter 35, Dysfunctional Band. The Legend of Sunset Shimmer, Majora's Mask. By Ganondorf 8. November 28, 2016. Chapter 35, Dysfunctional Band. Had I seriously carved song lyrics onto a grave? I knew that Thunderlane wanted me to as a last request, but now that I think about it, perhaps I should have asked him to write them down on a piece of paper. In any case, I looked at the fishbone guitar he left behind and discovered that it had writing. The words were written in a strange language which I assumed was Zora script, yet I could understand them clearly as though it were English. If I had tried to read this as a human, it would have appeared as nothing but gibberish. The words started out with an epitaph dedicated to Thunderlane, or rather who he portrayed. Herein lies Miko, the legendary guitarist of the Zora tribe. He is to be remembered in song, and his lyrics are written here. 1. Below this were two sets of lyrics that seemed to describe what he was capable of doing as a Zora. I never realized until now that this was what I had written down before his spirit disappeared into the next life. The first one was called We the Zora, and while the name could have used some work, I felt it resonating within my heart because being one of the Zora myself. I began reading, and it felt like he was right next to me, guiding me on being able to perform the abilities of his people.
Sharp fins are the mark of the Zora. While others think they are merely for show, they are blades, extensions of ourselves that we use in our everyday lives. We swim using them, speeding through water as though we were one with the seas. We are graceful, swimming with such speed. We are gorgeous, envy of others who don't understand our ways. We are masters of the ocean. Those who possess magic can perform an ability known only to a chosen few. A shield is produced to deflect enemies. It can also defeat weak foes who try to dominate what is ours and ours alone. Oh. We the Zora.
That was certainly some useful information, although the lyrics didn't sound all that good. Then again, that is what Thunderlane told me to carve onto his grave. How did I know what words he wanted to have carved? It's not like he had any time to teach me them before he passed on from this world. Once again, I realized that there was no point in trying to figure out how this video game world was supposed to work. I should have realized that any attempt to do just that resulted in nothing but headache. Still, I learned that I could swim incredibly fast while in this body. If Rainbow saw me swimming around at such speeds, her jaw would drop and it would be epic, yet it was the magic shield that formed through the use of magic. It may not have been offensive like the bubbles and spikes were for my other forms, but defense was something I felt I needed due to knowing my journey was about to get more difficult from this point onward. The other set of lyrics was called the Zora Fight Song. Why would a Zora need to know how to fight? I always assumed that they were a peaceful race who loved to swim about without a care in the world. Could it be that Thunderlane was an exception to his people? If so, then it did explain how he ended up so beaten up when I found him. In any case, I began to read these lyrics.
My punches are ones of anger. With every chop that you make, the fury builds and cannot be stopped. The flurry of attacks will go from the punch to the kick, leaving enemies unable to respond to such fury. If you feel that an enemy resists the flurry, then my deadly move will make them regret ever seeing you. By aiming one's fins and concentrating, one can fire them like boomerangs that will cut down anything that stands in your way. Such sharp power is known as the double cutters. Use it well and nothing can stop you. The Zora fight with so much might, enemies won't ever know what got them. Oh. We the Zora.
Well, I had used my fins in the manner in which he spoke of, but not very well given how I stumbled about. Concentration was the key to making them do what I wanted, though it was going to take me some time to get used to it, even with knowing what to do.
Did you understand everything, Sunset?
Twilight asked.
I personally got the gist of it, although those lyrics were pretty wordy. Wait. How can you read Zora script? You're not a Zora. No, but I can read them just fine.
I scratched my head.
Maybe fairies can read other languages.
Princess Twilight chuckled.
I did do that when you read those words on Maud's grave. I guess I'm more observant than you are, Sunset, but I won't hold it against you seeing as you've got a lot on your mind, what with having to continue Thunderlane's mission of retrieving those eggs. I wonder where we need to go in order to find the pirate's hideout? He never did give us any hints about that. We could always ask Pinky,
I said, pointing up towards where she was floating in the sky.
She's been pretty good at giving us advice, and I could do with purchasing a new map since this is a new area and all. Do you have enough rupees?
I took out my wallet and began to comb through it.
It looks like I have about 30 rupees, but I don't recall picking any up along the way. Maybe you picked them up while riding on Epona. That doesn't sound possible. Does anything in this world make sense, Sunset? No, I guess not. At least you have money, otherwise you would have to go back to Termina Field and scrounge up some rupees by cutting down bushes.
Twilight said. That's when she noticed something and immediately went silent. I waved my hand in front of her and she didn't flinch, so I looked in the direction she was and saw what had caught her attention.
What in the world is Flash Sentry doing over there on top of that house? Come to think of it, he wasn't there when you took Epona over there before. Maybe he just arrived. That doesn't make sense.
Twilight answered.
I mean, I'm glad that he's here as he has given you some sage advice, and I guess I want to see him for... well... you know, those kinds of reasons? You know what I'm saying, right?
I rolled my eyes. Her Highness still had some romantic feelings for Flash despite not coming to the world that I called home as often as she used to. To be fair, their romance wasn't going to work out, and not because he was a human and she was a pony. No, the reason it wouldn't work was because she had her princess duties in Equestria that required her to be there at all times, thus leaving her little room to pay me or anyone else at Canterlot High a visit. Besides, I had a feeling Flash was going to focus on Twilight Sparkle, although I heard from him just after the friendship games that he didn't realize that she wasn't the Twilight that he knew. Maybe I ought to talk to Flash the next time I see him, and not in this world. He wouldn't even understand what I say if I begin bringing up the human world so that I can tell it to him straight without hurting his feelings. He was a pretty sensitive guy whose tough act protected a nervous individual who was still trying to find his place. Her Highness was easier to deal with as she could easily understand that their romance would never happen. Still, I felt bad knowing that I would be the one to end their relationship, although it had to be done for the good of both of them. Sighing, I climbed up a ladder until I was standing in front of the building that was situated out on the ocean. A sign nearby said that this was the Oceanside Laboratory and that the proprietor was conducting ocean research. Perhaps whoever worked here knew something about Great Bay and could tell me where I could find those pirates, but my first priority involved talking to Pinkie Pie. As always, she was off in her own little world, ignoring everything around her while she worked on creating those maps. I supposed I was jealous of her carefree attitude and longed to be able to relax once this adventure had concluded. I aimed my Zora up at her balloon, concentrated as hard as I could, and fired them only to miss her by about several feet. When my fins came back to me, I realized that I needed to bring her down as a human by firing an arrow from my bow. The thought of changing back after only being a Zora for several minutes was disheartening, but Pinkie's knowledge was much more important. Grabbing my face, I pulled off the Zora mask, flipped back my head, and put it away before taking out my bow. Unlike with the Goron mask, I wasn't sweaty or anything when I changed back from being a Zora. Perhaps this was because being an aquatic creature kept me moist, although thinking about it like that freaked me out a little. Shivering, I aimed up, fired an arrow that popped Pinkie's balloon, and she dropped down, landing on the ground buckling her legs.
Yow!
Pinkie Pie shouted.
Why do my legs always suffer like that? I didn't mean to bring you down so forcefully.
Pinkie Pie looked at me.
Well, I suppose that was one way of getting my attention, but could you please be more gentle next time? I don't know why, but my legs have been feeling weaker as of late, as though something kept on bringing me down from the sky. I suppose it's just me overthinking again.
That's when she noticed my clothes and the fairy that was floating around me.
What's this? Green clothes? White fairy? Madam? Are you perchance a forest fairy?
I rubbed the bridge of my nose. One thing I had grown tired of was Pinkie's introduction, yet she couldn't help herself what with me resetting time.
Yes, I am a forest fairy, so please don't make such a big deal about it, okay? That wasn't very fun. Sorry, but I've seen this enough times now.
Pinkie gave me a puzzled look.
But this is the first time I've ever seen you before.
Crap. I also forgot that she doesn't remember me. Once again, I allowed my temper to get the better of me, so I quickly had to change my tune.
Sorry about that. I mistook you for someone else who goes around dressed up in that unique get-up. People in town told me that you're who I need to see about getting maps of areas across Termina.
Part of me felt weird explaining something I had already explained before, yet I knew there was no other alternative. Such was the displeasure of resetting time, you had to repeat yourself knowing that the party receiving your explanation doesn't remember the previous encounters.
Really?
Pinkie Pie asked.
People in Clock Town think that way about Tingle? I didn't think they noticed me. Oh, they notice you all right,
I said under my breath.
Did you say something? Nothing.
Pinkie gave me a scornful expression but quickly resumed her bubbly self.
So, you're looking for a map of Great Bay? Tingle has a map of this region that I can sell to you, and since you look like an adventurer, Mrs. Fairy, I think you want to know something about this area. Is Tingle correct? Do you want to know more, Mrs. Fairy?
I nodded my head.
I could really do with some information. Map first, information later. Okay, so how much do I need to pay you for the map? That would be 20 rupees for the map of Great Bay.
Pinkie Pie answered.
Or I could sell you a map of Akana for 40 rupees, but then you would need to be over there if you're trying to earn my discount. I'll go with the first option. Okie dokie Loki,
Pinkie Pie said in a cheerful tone. It felt nice hearing her say those words, but it would have been even better had she been her true self instead of this character who went around the land drawing maps all while wearing a questionable outfit.
I am so happy that you're buying one of Tingle's maps. I don't sell as many as I would like and it makes me sad as I do this to help my father. He says Tingle should stop wearing this attire, but why should Tingle do so? I make wearing this look good.
She reached into her pocket, I assumed that's what it was, and she produced a map that she proceeded to hand over to me.
So this is a map of Great Bay? Yep. Now about that information. Tingle knows plenty of things around Great Bay. Such as the Zora tribe has recently acquired some new members when their famous singer laid some eggs.
Pinkie Pie answered.
No one knew that she was expecting, so it was a surprise to everyone, yet they say there is something strange about the eggs. Unfortunately, some mean people stole the eggs about 2 nights ago. This resulted in the Zora mother becoming unable to speak. It was the Gerudo pirates, right? Wow. You must be psychic, Mrs. Fairy. Call it an obvious guess,
I said.
Where are they now? At their fortress located on the north end of Great Bay.
Pinkie Pie answered. She then noticed that I had the urge to go there right away but quickly raised her hands up in front of me to discourage me from going.
I wouldn't try going there if I were you, Mrs. Fairy, unless you want to die. The Gerudo pirates are notorious for being ruthless towards anyone who even remotely thinks about wanting to sneak inside. Unless you were that Zora hero, then the chances of you succeeding are slim to none. Besides, it's not like they will open their doors just because you say so. Doors. The main entrance to their fortress consists of these 2 huge doors that are impossible to destroy. I'm not sure if there are any other entrances, but I'm sure that Zora hero knew of one, as he usually goes there in order to sort them out whenever they go too far.
Pinkie Pie answered. Thunderlane knew of an entrance and he didn't bother to tell me that? I wanted to rip out some of my hair in sheer frustration, but that would have only given strange looks from both Pinkie and Her Highness. Maybe it was possible that I could gain access to Thunderlane's memories upon changing into a Zora. I had his abilities, so it would make sense if I had his memories as well. It would make finding an entrance to the pirate's fortress a lot easier other than running around blindly. If that doesn't work, then I would have no other choice but to talk to the Zoras themselves. Surely one of them would have told something to Thunderlane, or at least acted as a trusted confidant whom he could share some secrets with. Pinkie then looked at me with a big smile on her face. Even when she was wearing a ridiculous outfit, it was impossible for me or anyone else to ignore such an adorable face, though her random nature could stand to be improved. It quickly dawned on me that Pinkie was forcing me to come up with another question by using her smile. Quickly, I looked around in hopes of finding something, and I found something that could prove useful.
What do they do in this laboratory? The scientist who lives there studies the ocean as a hobby.
Pinkie Pie answered.
But she spends most of the time looking at her giant tank.
I blinked.
Did you say, tank? Yeah. She has a huge tank filled with water.
I honestly thought she meant the other kind of tank, but I should have known better than that.
Why would the scientist have a giant tank of water? Unless... Is she using it to further advance her studies? Of course not, silly.
Pinkie Pie answered.
The tank was created some time ago to give the Zora eggs the proper environment for them to hatch in due to how weird the water has been getting lately. The scientist is an old friend of Zora and agreed to help by setting aside some water. Tingle doesn't understand the entirety of their arrangement, but I am sure you can ask her yourself if you go inside. By the way, Mrs. Fairy, Have you ever heard of seahorses?
Were they the same as the mythical sea ponies that existed underwater throughout the oceans of Equestria? Granted, some of them were aggressive from what I recalled from my studies of them, while others were more playful. Either way, they rarely interacted with ponies, although they were acknowledged by Princess Celestia as being creatures of Equestria. As for an actual seahorse itself, I remember learning about them in science class, yet I didn't pay much attention. It was at the time when I wasn't the nicest of people and believed that I was destined for greater things, even if it meant making other people miserable. I shook my head.
No, I've never heard of them. They are a rare creature. How so? Many Zora have been trying to find them for a long time.
Pinkie Pie answered.
They believe that finding a seahorse will grant you tremendous luck, but then they are the only ones who know how to reach a place called Pinnacle Rock.
She then pointed towards the beach at the building Epona was resting in front of.
The fisherman who lives there has been bragging about getting a seahorse, though none of the Zora believe him. Tingle doesn't know whether it's true or not, but you could always ask him if you want. Oh yeah. Whatever you do, don't go into the building next to his unless you like creepy crawlies. It's infested with bugs. Golden bugs. What do you mean? That building is infested with golden spiders, though no one knows why. Gold skulltulas. Is that what they are called?
Pinkie Pie asked.
Tingle always thought they were called golden spiders. I did see someone snooping around there the other day, but he didn't come back today. Maybe he was frightened off by the thought of golden spiders wandering about in there, yet he was carrying a large wallet that could probably hold a lot of money. That is something Tingle needs more of. Tingle needs more rupees to help my father. Well, that's it for information, Mrs. Fairy, so I hope I was helpful to you.
I nodded my head.
More than you realize. Okie dokie Loki.
Pinkie Pie exclaimed.
If you need another one of Tingle's maps, you know how to call me, although please be gentle next time. My legs might not be able to take the strain if I continue dropping out of the sky when my balloon gets popped. Well, call again. Tingle tingle Kololimpa.
She performed a quick dance before finishing by scattering confetti all around. While it wasn't particularly amusing, I didn't say anything in case I offended her.
These are the magic words Tingle created herself. Don't steal them.
With that, she began to inflate her balloon and was soon up in the air again, leaving Princess Twilight and I to ponder over our next move. We had learned a great deal of information from Pinkie Pie this time, although she didn't mention certain things such as knowing the location of where the Zora lived. Granted, I should have asked her the question when I had the chance, and while I could bring her back down and ask, it would be a waste of her time. I wasn't completely lost though. Miss Pommel mentioned that the Zoras lived in a place called Zora Hall, so at least I knew the name, although that meant nothing without knowing the exact location. Then again, there wasn't much to Great Bay other than going up and down along the beach. The chances of finding Zora Hall were pretty good since I didn't have much to explore, yet a part of me still wanted to visit the pirate's fortress since that was where the eggs had been taken to. My heart wanted to help those eggs, yet my head was telling me that going there now would be nothing short of a suicide. Without knowing exactly how to get in there, not to mention what was waiting inside, I would have to go there once I had enough information. There was one thing I was curious about regarding the pirates. Assuming that the Zora watched over the eggs constantly, how did the pirates get past and steal them from under the Zora's noses? Also, did the pirates have their own version of Ganondorf in charge? If he was here, how would he differ from the one who had been tormenting me? Just thinking about such a prospect sent a chill down my spine. I hoped it wasn't true.
What do you want to do now?
Twilight asked.
I want to go to the pirate's fortress, but I don't think that would be wise. No, it wouldn't.
Twilight said.
If you go there without knowing what to expect, you could end up being their prisoner or even worse. Pinkie said that only one Zora has ever gone up against the pirates on a regular basis, and that Zora was Thunderlane. That tells us that the Zora are not fighters aside from him. And the Gerudo? I'm going to assume that they are fighters. That does explain some things. It does. I was thinking about how the pirates stole those eggs.
I answered.
They could have used their superior fighting skill and overpowered the Zora, thus enabling them to steal the eggs without any problems. Maybe, but I think they relied on stealth. Really?
Princess Twilight nodded.
Yes. I doubted the pirates wanted to engage in a confrontation with the Zora, so their best option was to steal the eggs without anyone knowing they were there to begin with. They might have had a secret tunnel or something similar that allowed them to get inside undetected. That does sound more plausible. We won't know for certain until we see Zora Hall for ourselves. Should we leave and come back here during the next cycle of time? No, I think we should continue going.
Twilight answered.
We should get as much as we can get done around here before resetting time. I have this feeling that you'll need all the time you can muster to explore the pirate's fortress, and trying to start it now wouldn't give you that much time.
The only options I had were to see what Flash Sentry wanted or pay a visit to this scientist who lived in the building I was standing in front of. My first instinct told me to go see Flash, as he would no doubt dispense some valuable words of wisdom, yet Her Highness began tugging on my ear as though to say she wanted me to see the scientist. Despite everything she had been through as a princess in Equestria, she still had trouble dealing with the likes of Flash. Was I ever this bad? He's not the same person that she grew attracted to, as here he is a different person, but because she is both my friend and mentor, I decided to go inside before going over to him. As I reached for the doorknob, I could hear the sounds of someone complaining coming from the other side. It sounded like the scientist wasn't happy about something, so hopefully they wouldn't view me as being a nuisance. Turning the knob and opening the door, it made a very loud clicking sound. I went inside and Princess Twilight's eyes immediately became mesmerized by what we were seeing. The laboratory contained various scientific devices strewn about the room that caught her attention, yet what caught mine was the giant tank of water that Pinkie Pie mentioned. She wasn't kidding when she said it was huge. It had enough water that could fill up a swimming pool, so why did some Zora eggs need all that space? Granted, I wasn't an expert on how Zoras worked when it came to their reproductive cycles, but still, it was a little ridiculous to the point of being sheer overkill. Another thing I noticed was a small fish tank to the right of the front door. Inside the tank was a strange-looking fish that I could swear winked at me every few moments. It's not that I was afraid of it, but rather nervous that it was doing that to begin with. That's when I noticed the scientist, who was staring at the tank all while complaining about why someone was taking so long to get here. I didn't know who she was talking about, yet it was obvious she wasn't happy. This was going to be difficult, no doubt. I couldn't tell who it was since they were facing away from me, but when the scientist suddenly turned around, probably due to feeling the draft coming from outside, I was staring at a somewhat familiar face. She merely coughed before turning her attention back to watching the giant tank, leaving to wonder if it was a good idea being here.
Daring Do,
Twilight began.
I'm surprised that she is the scientist here. In Equestria, she's a famous archaeologist who goes around finding hidden artifacts and donating them to museums, and also goes undercover as A.K. Yearling, a famous author. Why would someone like her be in such a perfect place like this?
I rolled my eyes.
I knew you would like this place, Twilight. It just screams research to you, doesn't it? But, what did you mean about A.K. Yearling? You've read some of her books. Back when I was Princess Celestia's student. I didn't think you did, considering. I may have been self-centered and a brat, but I enjoyed a good read every now and again. That's something new I've learned about you, Sunset.
Twilight said.
Anyway, A.K. Yearling is in fact Daring Do, although only the pony versions of our friends and myself know the truth, as she wishes to keep that under wraps. I don't know why she does that, although if I were to make a guess, it's to avoid those who pursue her. Archaeologists do make enemies of treasure hunters. So very true.
Daring Do had been ignoring us the entire time, although her sudden loud cough indicated otherwise.
Are you done talking with that fairy? I need to concentrate so that I can take care of those eggs when they arrive. They're late. What are those Zoras doing? They should have been here by now. I thought I told Evan the Zora representative needed to be punctual given how fragile those eggs can be, yet she insisted that Miko be the one to bring them. Sigh. I'll bet he's having a lot of fun beating up on those accursed Gerudo pirates, all because of his heroic blood.
I gulped softly. She wasn't aware that Thunderlane was dead and that I was the one who had been tasked with finishing his mission. No wonder Daring Do was so annoyed over having to wait for the representative, as she called it. It all started to make sense now. He was supposed to bring the Zora eggs here, yet that wasn't going to happen now. I also began to understand why Daring Do had a giant tank of water in her laboratory. Those eggs were meant to be placed inside, but why would they need to come here? Shouldn't they be reunited with the Zora that laid them in the first place?
I began. I was wondering if you could help me with something. I have no time to deal with the likes of a child. Well, I came here to see the Zora eggs hatch. What did you say?
Daring Do asked as she span around to look directly at me.
What is it, girl? Did you also come to watch the Zora eggs hatch? Hold on. How do you know about that? I thought the only ones who knew were the band members and myself.
I began to sweat profusely. Crap. I mentioned something that I should have and now Daring-do was about to grill me. I needed to come up with an excuse and fast before she suspects something was amiss.
I heard about them from a Zora with a fishbone guitar who came through this area recently.
Daring-do rubbed the bridge of her nose before moaning.
Ugh. I should have known Miko would tell a complete stranger about the Zora eggs. He always was hot-headed, ignorant of what it means to keep secrets. At least he didn't tell anyone outside of the Indigo Goes, otherwise Zora Hall would be in an uproar. Did he say something wrong? He lets his bravado get in the way of logical thinking. It sounds like you don't like him. No, I do.
Daring-do said.
It's just that he sometimes doesn't think before he acts. If he could learn to be more responsible and not run headlong into danger, then he just might live a lot longer than he would with his current course of action.
I went limp knowing Thunderlane had died because of just that.
You seem a little pale, girl. Are you perchance suffering from drinking the water?
I shook my head.
No, it's something else. Then pay me no mind.
Daring-do said.
Anyway, since you know about the Zora eggs, I hope you're excited about them hatching. I'm excited about it, too, but those important eggs haven't arrived yet and I'm started to get worried.
She walked over and placed her hand on the glass tank before staring into the deep recesses of water. I thought about comforting her but refrained given that I wasn't sure what her problem was.
It takes about 1 to 3 days from the time Zora eggs are laid for them to hatch. So then they were laid a couple of days ago. Correct. What would happen if they hatch in the wrong location? That would be disastrous.
Daring-do answered.
If those eggs aren't placed into this tank, then there is a good chance that they will die. I know it might sound absurd to you, girl, but my words are true. Things just haven't been going well at all in Great Bay ever since the water began to change. Why put the eggs in that tank? Did you not hear me? It's because of the water, or rather a combination of that and the weather.
Daring-do answered.
For some unexplained reason, the weather in this region has become abnormal to the point where it's starting to affect everything. The Zora cannot swim about without being attacked by strange creatures that have suddenly appeared, the ocean temperature has risen, and worst of all, the ecosystem could collapse at any moment. Only those Garudo aren't affected physically, but their plundering of the Zoras has been diminished, so there is at least some good news.
If only she knew what the pirates had done. My heart wanted me to tell her the truth about what had happened to both Miko and the eggs, yet my brain was saying not to mention anything as it would only make things worse than they already were. Daring-do noticed I was daydreaming and snapped her fingers, causing me to come to my senses.
My explanation couldn't possibly be boring. I find you to be very rude for acting in such a manner, but then you are a child, so ignoring authority is to be expected. Zora eggs are very sensitive to changes in the temperature, and because of that they will die if they don't hatch while submerged in the appropriate temperatures. Fortunately, I was asked by an old friend of mine among the Zora to prepare something just in case something like this were to happen. So that's why you have this tank? Yes.
Daring-do said.
The only way the eggs can hatch is if they're placed in this tank water, which I set aside for them long ago. It still contains the normal properties of the ocean and has not been tainted in any way. It is an ideal place for the Zora eggs to be hatched. The Zoras are well aware of this, but they're still late in bringing them here. I wonder if something happened at Zora Hall.
I was about to tell her that the pirates had stolen the eggs, but in the end I decided to go with my brain. I looked at Princess Twilight and I could tell that she knew that I had made the right decision by keeping my mouth shut. Despite knowing what was going on courtesy of Thunderlane, there was still much that wasn't clear to me. Was I doing the right thing by keeping Daring-do out of the loop? Perhaps, but then telling her would only result in her freaking out. Things were much more dire than I originally thought. I thought that I could take as much time as possible to rescue the eggs and take them back to whoever laid them, but now it had become a race against time with the fate of the unborn Zora now hanging in the balance. Once again I was feeling an incredible weight was being pushed onto my shoulders due to being chosen to complete Thunderlane's final request. I thought about becoming a Zora and seeing how Daring-do would react, but I chose against doing that as well, especially if it meant facing her wrath because of not having any of the eggs in my possession. For the moment, there wasn't much I could do, although I now knew that I needed to come back to the Oceanside Laboratory once I had all 7 eggs. One thing did cross my mind, and that was how was I supposed to carry the eggs around? It's not like they could be carried around like my usual equipment and items, and holding them in my hands would be both dangerous and rather unpleasant. Daring Do then went back to looking at her tank, her hand gesture signaling that she wanted me to leave since I no longer had anything to say. As I turned and began walking towards the door, I wondered why she was acting so grouchy considering the Zora had so much more at stake regarding the eggs than she did. She was nothing more than a caretaker who would take care of things once the eggs arrived. While I appreciated her for wanting to help the Zora in their time of need, her attitude definitely needed some improvement. Hopefully, that same attitude would change upon bringing her what she wanted. Opening the door and stepping outside, I could see that the sun was starting to rise and that meant I didn't have any time to waste. Flash Sentry was the next person I needed to see, so without thinking, I dove into the water and began swimming back to shore as fast as I could. The skeletal fish from before started chasing me, but they quickly lost interest and swam back to their territory once they realized I was too fast for them. In hindsight, I should have changed into a Zora, but I figured that Flash would prefer to speak to me as a human, my true form and not an altered one. It didn't take long for me to reach the shore, though I was exhausted from swimming too fast, and when I climbed out of the water, my first instinct involved shaking my body to get rid of any excess water that was clinging onto my tunic. Flash was still situated on top of the house that belonged to the fisherman. I was surprised that he hadn't moved, though I attribute that to his owl companion. So once I was high and dry, I ran across the beach avoiding levers as they popped up from beneath the sand, and reached the patch of grass near the house where I had left Epona.
"We meet again, fairy child,"
Flash Sentry said as I approached.
"Oh. Hi,
Twilight said.
"Is your fairy companion feeling all right?"
Flash Sentry asked.
"She seems to having trouble talking in my presence." "Good to see you, here, again. I wish to speak to you of what you have accomplished thus far, but it is difficult for me to do so with your companion acting in such a way." "What? No. I'm not acting weird at all,"
Twilight said.
"Me? No way. I'm perfectly fine. Don't be silly."
I thought it was adorable seeing Her Highness struggle, but I knew that wasn't fair on her. I pointed at my hat to indicate that she should hide under there for a while until I was finished dealing with Flash, and while she was initially hesitant towards it, Princess Twilight knew that it was for the best. She quietly floated over to my head before wriggling her way under my hat. I breathed slightly, knowing how awkward that was, yet now I could focus on Flash, who still didn't know what to make of the situation. His owl companion simply turned its head upside in a creepy fashion. I couldn't tell if it was annoyed or expressing dismay. Once I was sure Her Highness was okay, I began to talk to Flash.
"I'm surprised to see you here, although why did you appear now?" "I have been here since before you first entered Great Bay,"
Flash Sentry answered.
"I sense that you are confused by words, so allow me to explain. I could have spoken to you the moment you arrived, but I feared that would have instilled intimidation given that this was a region completely foreign to you. You wanted me to explore on my own."
Flash Sentry nodded.
"I wanted to see if you could figure out why the beach has become troubled by a terrible curse. It appears that you have learned much by talking to those who are native to this region, and you have also acquired the power necessary to save those who live here." "The Zora mask." "Correct. If you knew that, then why didn't you save Miko?"
I asked, making sure not to refer to him as Thunderlane.
"Fate decided that you would be the one to heal his soul,"
Flash Sentry answered.
"The Zora whose power resides in the mask you hold didn't realize it, but he was doomed to perish against the darkness. I know it sounds horrible for me to say such a thing, yet my words speak a ring of truth. He was no match for what lurked below, yet you stand a much better chance of succeeding and fulfilling his dying wish. Still, you could have saved him. If I had, then you wouldn't have the power you hold now. Power isn't everything, you know. The Zora would not have survived anyway,"
Flash Sentry said.
"The wounds he sustained were fatal, no magic or potion could restore that which was no longer capable of holding on to his life. Thus, I could not save him, as it would have amounted to nothing, and you would not have the means to save this region."
Even though his words were spiteful in nature and I wanted to throttle him for being selfish, I knew deep down that he was telling the truth. When I found Thunderlane bobbing up and down in the ocean, I believed that he could simply have shook off whatever had injured him and continued on. In truth, his wounds were much more severe and he was clinging to life when I found him. Perhaps it was the guilt of not being able to save him that compelled me to lash out against Flash. I might not have known Thunderlane as much as Princess Twilight had, yet I felt such a strong connection between us that had culminated into me receiving a mask that contained his essence, his power. His wounds had occurred long before I first came to Termina, so the chances of preventing his death were impossible. Not even the Song of Time could help me save him, as the power contained within the melody would send me to the beginning, and he sustained those injuries before that.
What do I need to do? The Zora. You must speak to the Zora and they shall guide you further. I'm not sure they'd be willing to listen to an outsider.
Flash Sentry chuckled, a rare occurrence given how calm and collected he usually was.
The Zora whose mission is now yours was famous among his kind. You shall have no problems learning what you need to know. You should also bring along as many pieces of glass as possible.
At first I didn't understand what he meant by that, but I quickly deduced that he was referring to bottles.
Bottles? I have 3 already, but I need more.
Flash Sentry nodded.
You will come to understand my words when you finally enter the domain of the Zora's enemies. They are aware that the Zora hero will attempt to rescue what it was they stole, but they aren't aware that you are the one who carries on his mission. They will not be able to predict your actions, giving you an advantage. There is one other thing I can tell you about their fortress. A potion of life may prove essential and could allow you to become unseen. What does that even mean? Seek out the one who is unseen. Hey. It will become clear to you when the time comes.
Flash Sentry answered.
Though you shall struggle in your efforts, you must continue to be brave and overcome what stands before you are to save this world from destruction. 2 of the guardians have been free of the darkness that enchained them, yet the remaining guardians await you to free them. You must go now and seek the Zoras. Only they can help you any further, and remember who you are when you confront them.
Before I had a chance to say something in response, Flash patted his owl companion, and the giant bird took to the sky. I called out to him to tell me more, as I didn't understand much due to how cryptic he was, yet he refused to answer me, and soon he was out of sight. I pounded my fist into the grass, prompting Epona to trot over and nuzzle me in the face. Her concern relieved me of the temper that had been building up inside me. It wasn't all that much to begin with, and I whinnied at her to thank her for helping me calm down. Still, I was annoyed at how Flash didn't give me direct answers. I understood that he couldn't make it easy for me, but he didn't have to be cryptic with his answers. What I did understand was that I needed to speak to the Zoras at Zora Hall first and foremost. What he said about needing bottles and a red potion were confusing given his choice of words, but perhaps Princess Twilight had an idea. When it came to understanding cryptic messages, Her Highness was an expert compared to me. Tapping my hat to indicate that Flash was gone, Princess Twilight wormed her way out from under my hat before floating in front of me.
You don't need to say anything about my behavior, Sunset. I can't believe how I acted around him despite knowing he's not the same Flash I know. I'm supposed to be a princess who can remain calm in any situation, yet I went and acted like a complete moron in front of a guy I might still have some feelings towards. Might. I'm aware that the chances of Flash and I crushing on one another are slim to none because we both live in different dimensions and have different destinies. Still, I'd like to think that we can work something out, but I know that's just foolish talk at best.
Twilight answered.
In other words, I'm moving on from him. That's unexpected. And why is that? I think Flash still has a thing for you.
I answered.
He still talks about hoping to see you again, yet he might try to gain the attention of the other Twilight even though he doesn't know that isn't you. Honestly, I was expecting you to be a little defiant and say that it could still work out. I was just fooling myself.
Twilight said.
I know it will never work out. It will take me a while to get used to the feeling, but it's for the best that I move on, otherwise I could end up regretting it later if I don't nip the problem in the bud right now. The next time we encounter Flash, I won't act all gaga around him. No, I'll confront him with respect and not shy away even though he won't understand. Will we see him again?
Princess Twilight nodded.
Yes. There is still one more region we haven't explored, so the chances of seeing him again are pretty good. Anyway, we should get moving if we're to reach Zora Hall before the sun comes up, and I suggest changing into a Zora and remaining as such.
Nodding my head in agreement, I took out the Zora mask and placed it on my face. The magic started to take effect and I squatted down, bringing my arms close to my body, and remained like that for several seconds before standing up and screamed. I began to wonder why I had to scream every time I was about to finish the transformation. While no one else ever noticed me doing it, it didn't exactly give me any confidence. The transition wasn't painful in that it caused my internal organs some discomfort, for example, yet the scream made it seem that I wasn't enjoying the experience. Truth is, I didn't enjoy the transition due to the side effects, but I loved the resulting forms I become. Each form was like an extension of myself that contained my memories and natural skills combined with abilities that particular form possessed. Once I finished the transformation, I felt compelled to show off my Zora body by strutting my stuff. Why did I do that? I wasn't sure, but it may have had something to do with being a gorgeous aquatic creature. Whinnying to Epona and informing her that I would be gone for a lengthy period of time, she whinnied back in response, and I began running towards a large cave opening that I assumed lead to Zora Hall.
How were we able to even get down here under that poisonous swamp? Never underestimate the power of an intellectual mind. You expect me to believe that? No, but then what other explanation could there be? I suppose you're right. I'll admit that I was surprised that a temple was buried underneath a swamp of all things.
The small figure said.
Whoever hid it down here knew what they were doing or didn't want anyone to find it. It doesn't matter though, as we found it, and that's what matters. Now, let me just make a few quick calculations.
The small figure placed her hand on a nearby wall, the dampness making her cringe slightly, and began concentrating by moving it around as though she were looking for something that lay beyond. It wasn't long before she removed her hand upon sensing a weak aura coming from somewhere.
I can sense kindness coming from the other side. Do you think it could be her, Fluttershy? Yes.
The small figure answered.
I have no doubt about that, although why would she be here of all places? It's not exactly her comfort zone, but then, we have seen stranger things throughout this world. It doesn't matter why she's here,
the tall figure said.
The important thing is that she is here, and that means getting to her without delay. We've done things your way up to this point, so now we get to do it my way. I won't go crazy with my power, as I know it could cause a cave-in where I go to overboard.
She walked up to the wall and punched it using her fist, causing it to crumble away, revealing a room beyond.
It looks like we may have to go through several rooms before we reach Fluttershy, but I could do with some practice since it's been a while since I last got to flex my muscles. I am curious about something. What's that? Why did Applejack's element react the way it did?
The tall figure shook her head.
I don't know, but it did confirm your theory that those girls' magic is trying to breach this world. I am still annoyed that you wanted us to leave without killing her, but I suppose we had no choice since our own magic has been sealed thanks to this world. That's why I insisted we track down the rest of her friends and see if they go through a similar experience. Just because I want revenge doesn't mean I'm blinded by it. I know patience is now important, as being impulsive only resulted in me being defeated by her every single time. You have learned something after all.
The tall figure glared at her companion but quickly regained focus.
If what happened to Applejack happens to Fluttershy, it could give us a clue as to what we can do to unleash our full power instead of having to hide in the shadows. Still, we should check them all out just in case one of them reacts differently than the rest. Pinkie Pie is located in different places, so it shouldn't be difficult to track her down,
the small figure said.
We already know where my significant other is, so we can go back to her whenever we want, but Rainbow Dash and Rarity are currently missing. Where could they be in this world? Unless they tap into their equestrian magic, we can't pinpoint them. Ugh. That's so aggravating. Which is why we need Sunset to find them. I still can't believe that she is the one who brought out the magic of her friends,
the tall figure said.
How is that even possible? Her own magic has been sealed off just like the rest of us, so she shouldn't have been able to do that. You must realize that she is special. I refuse to admit that.
The small figure sighed.
As long as you continue to think like that, you will never be able to overcome Sunset. You have to accept that she has powers that are different from what you have and is much more powerful. The magic of friendship is something one mustn't underestimate. Don't patronize me. Just saying it like it is. And what about you?
The tall figure asked.
How do you feel knowing that the other Twilight rejected you by accepting her?
The small figure went quiet, although she clenched her hand into a fist and began grumbling under her breath. The tall figure laughed hysterically before having to wipe away a tear from her eye.
Ha! You're just the same as I am when it comes to the other Twilight. You pretend that you're in this for knowledge by acting calm, but in truth you want to become the real her and acquire all that magic, don't you?
The small figure slowly nodded her head, resulting in the tall figure chuckling this time.
See? Wasn't that much better? You enjoyed that, didn't you? Maybe.
The small figure sighed.
Let's just get on with this. Fair enough.
The tall figure said.
It will only take me a few moments to reach Fluttershy and then we can put your theory to the test.
Trying to reach Zora Hall proved more difficult than I initially expected. Levers continued to pop out of the sand, plaguing me as I ran across the beach, and while I desired to attack them, Her Highness reminded me that doing so would bring up the aggressive blue one. While I wasn't afraid to fight, I didn't want to waste time dealing with monsters given that time wasn't on my side. Not only did I have to deal with levers, but other monsters ended up getting in my way, such as the like that I vaguely remembered from my previous journey. All I could recall about them was how they could consume items, and Princess Twilight said that so long I wasn't in my human form, I wouldn't lose any items should I wind up being caught inside the mouth of such hideous creatures. She also told me that defeating a like would result in earning a lot of rupees that could go towards purchasing additional items, but the risk was greater than the reward. At least they weren't fast, so they were easy to outrun, although their uncanny ability to stretch what constituted as their mouths meant they were capable of attacking at a slight distance. It wasn't all bad though, as I soon encountered a few Zoras who were standing on the beach. When I went up to each of them to engage in a conversation, they all treated me like I was a celebrity. Technically that was true since Thunderlane was a member of the Indigogos, yet they also commented on how I looked different, as though I had lost some weight resulting from how often I fought against the Gerudo pirates. While it wasn't as bad as I thought it would be, I still felt uneasy having to deal with the gender issue. Thunderlane was a guy and I was a girl, so I couldn't help being worried about them figuring out the truth. One Zora wanted to see if I could break all of the pots he had on display and was insistent about it. I never knew Zora could be so pushy. I decided to take him up on his offer, knowing that refusing would go against what Thunderlane stood for. Unfortunately, I ended up losing out on 20 rupees due to not being all that good at using my fins. The Zora actually thought I hadn't been practicing my skills and became rusty, so I humored him by agreeing with his assessment. Another Zora had asked me if I had been collecting any bottles. Despite my hesitation towards answering the question, I concluded that I could trust him and said that I had picked up a few here and there. He said that there were a pair of beavers who lived on top of the waterfall, and they collected bottles though they weren't willing to give them up. Many Zora had tried to beat them in a race to earn one of their bottles, yet no one proved fast enough. The Zora suggested for me to try since I was supposedly the fastest, yet my reason for wanting to try involved what Flash Sentry said. I continued on heading southward until I came across an impressive sight. A large building out in the ocean stood before me, yet I also noticed that part of it was underwater, and that made sense since the Zora loved swimming below the surface.
That must be Zora Hall,
I said.
I've got to admit that it does look really impressive. No doubt someone in there can help us get into the pirates' fortress. Who would be the rest Zoras to ask? Most of them are likely to compliment on your fame, I mean, Thunderlane's fame, since you are him in a sense.
I nodded.
That means I have to talk to his bandmates. Yes,
Twilight said.
They view him as being a regular Zora who happens to be one of the group, so you should be able to get some information from them. By the way, I hope that you're ready for a swim, as it looks like you'll need to swim underwater to enter Zora Hall. I can barely make out an entrance down there, so this means it's time to see if you can swim like a fish and not drown. This is nothing compared to what I've been through,
I said boldly. That was a true statement. In my previous journey, I had to go through a temple that was mostly filled with water, and not only did I swim in it, I also walked underwater through the use of a special tunic that allowed me to breathe and boots with iron soles. Swimming underwater as a Zora was going to be simple.
Before we go splashing about in the ocean, do you have any information regarding those skeletal fish? I can see a few of them near the entrance you mentioned. That is a skullfish,
Twilight said.
They home in on any prey that enters their territory and attempt to bite it with their sharp teeth. A single one by itself won't do much damage, but an entire school of them will become a problem. Also, some of them are larger than others, so it will take a couple of hits to defeat them. Will my fins work on them?
Princess Twilight nodded.
They are like sharp blades, so definitely go with those, as you can't fight underwater unless you're a Zora. If you're not confident with your ability to use your fins, you can use your magical barrier to defeat the skullfish. Be warned though that using the barrier consumes magic.
I walked to the water's edge and peered into the depths below before walking into the water. It felt incredible knowing that I could breathe underwater and move about freely without any heavy weights dragging me down. While I had experience thanks to the water temple, this was the first time I actually felt like an actual aquatic creature. No wonder the Zoras felt at home in the water, as it was second nature to them. The skullfish were swimming ahead of me, yet they hadn't noticed me so far, but I wasn't about to take that chance. I could easily defeat them using my new abilities, but I had to focus on getting inside and finding Thunderlane's bandmates. Using my legs as a means of momentum, I launched myself forward and swam at a ridiculous speed that proved difficult for me to control initially, but I quickly gained leverage and swam past the skullfish until I smacked into the wall to the left of the entrance. While it wasn't the most graceful of conclusions, the amount of speed I had would have made Rainbow Dash feel jealous. Swimming as a Zora was a lot of fun, although I needed to work on maintaining control, otherwise I could get into trouble down the road. Since I didn't have much farther, I swam at a brisk pace, entering the large cave opening before finding myself staring at a wall that was covered with seashells. It looked pretty compared to some other things. I looked up and saw that the water level wasn't as high as it was outside. I swam upwards to the surface, climbed out of the water and walked forward until I came upon another impressive sight. I had to hand it to the Zoras. They certainly knew how to make a good first impression. The interior of Zora Hall consisted of a large pond of water that looked to serve no actual purpose other than be a beautiful set piece, and a stage built into the shell of what appeared to be a giant clam. This must be what the Indigogos used to perform in front of their people, as I could see a few Zoras working on setting things up. Compared to where they would be performing if the go-ahead had been given, this stage was far superior to the one at the milk bar, so why go from glamour to something less? A few Zora were walking around, while others were standing in front of several doors that could be accessed by use of a pathway that went around the pond. I suspected that the doors lead to the rooms that housed the bandmates, so at least I wasn't going around blind.
Wow! This place is beautiful,
Twilight said.
Truly a magnificent spectacle if I ever saw one. Better than what they have at Canterlot. I wouldn't go that far.
I chuckled.
Sorry, but I just had to say that and get a reaction out of you. Very funny. Which room should we check out first?
Princess Twilight pointed to the one to my right.
Let's start with that one and work our way around in a counterclockwise direction.
I walked in that direction until I reached the door, only to be stopped by the Zora who was standing in front of it. I asked him why he was doing that, and he responded by saying he didn't want anyone to go inside who wasn't a band member. I thought that to be rather odd given how popular the Indigogos were according to what I had heard. Why deny the fans their right to see their superstars practicing? The Zora recognized me as Thunderlane and said that I could go inside since I apparently shared this room with someone named Tijo. I opened the door, went inside, and found myself staring at a sparsely filled room. Compared to the central area outside, this room lacked charm, although it wasn't uninhabitable compared to other places I've seen. A Zora was sitting behind a large drum set made of fish heads. I didn't know if they were alive or not yet. The sight made me feel nauseous. That reminded me of Pinkie Pie, but this wasn't her by any stretch of the imagination.
Miko? Where have you been? Do I know you? Who are you trying to kid? It's me, Tijo, your roommate? Have you been swimming around in the ocean or something? I thought Evan warned everyone not to go swimming out there until further notice.
I had no idea as to who this Zora was, although he looked like he would be an expert at snowboarding given his hairstyle.
Miko? Is everything okay? You're giving me a weird look. Sorry about that. It's cool. You're probably stressed over the upcoming concert at the Carnival of Time tomorrow night.
Did I just hear him right? He and the other band members were looking forward to performing? I thought Miss Pommel had informed them that the concert had been cancelled by order of Monsieur Aroma. It looked like this was a guess of miscommunication, with the Indigogos not receiving the message. Come to think of it, I doubted Thunderlane knew that there wasn't going to be a show, but then someone among the band surely knew. Not only did I have questions regarding the Garudo, I also felt compelled to figure out what was going on. Her Highness then whispered in my ear.
That's Double Diamond, a pony, who lives in the village where Starlight came from. He was one of her followers. I wouldn't say it like that,
Twilight answered.
He believed in what she said about getting rid of his cutie mark, and I guess he was fiercely loyal to her to the point where she used him as a spy to ensure no pony decided to cause any trouble. All I know about him is that he's an avid skier despite ponies lacking any arms and poles. Miko? Is there something you would like to say?
Double Diamond asked.
No. Why?
I asked.
You're mumbling to that fairy and it feels like you're talking about someone. It's just that my friend says you remind her of someone. Really? I didn't think I had that kind of impression on anyone.
Double Diamond said.
Come to think of it, Miko. Why are you hanging around with a fairy? Is that supposed to be the start of a new trend everyone else will go nuts over? You know how Zoras can be fickle whenever one of us introduces a new fad.
He then looked at me for several seconds, his eyes combing over every last part of my body, and it really creeped me out.
Have you lost some weight? I've never seen you look better since I've known you. You've gotta tell me your secret, Miko, I'm begging you, especially when I did something wrong. What did you do?
Double Diamond nervously pointed to a broken ladder that was propped up against a high-up platform.
Don't get mad, but I want you to hear this. I tried to climb up the ladder to your practice area, and it broke, resulting in the mess you see for a ladder. Why would you go up there? I was curious and I wanted to see what it was like. That I understand, so then how did the ladder break? I'm overweight.
Double Diamond answered. To be fair, he certainly didn't look the part, but I wasn't about to question his opinion.
I promise that I'll go on a diet when everything has settled down and we can perform. I'm sorry for breaking your ladder, Miko. It's just been one problem after another with me as of late. Want to talk about it?
Double Diamond nodded enthusiastically.
I've heard that the others aren't speaking to each other and no one has bothered to tell me anything. Everyone is in a bad funk and it's going to make our concert sound terrible. You probably didn't know about any of that since you were out doing whatever it is you do, but I fear the band could break up if things don't get better real soon. Lulu is especially having a bad time, though I'm not sure why. It feels like it's been forever since I last heard her voice, and she's usually in a spirited mood. You know, her silent treatment has gotten me thinking. About what? About the ocean getting weird.
While this had nothing to do with getting into the pirate's fortress, the problem that related to the ocean was something I needed to figure out. I figured that I would need to solve that little dilemma given that it is affecting their way of life. I walked over to Double Diamond and inspected his drums, flicking one of them with my finger out of curiosity more than anything else. Despite it being a fish's head and disgusting in appearance, it possessed a rhythmic beat capable of soothing one's soul if they were feeling down. I also noticed it was held up by two pieces of coral either side of the drums. Double Diamond looked at me.
What are you doing?
I blushed.
I just wanted to hear your drum is all. You sure have some strange hobbies, Miko. Anyway, you were saying something about the ocean. That's right.
Double Diamond answered.
There's a rumor that the ocean is getting weird cause there's trouble offshore at Great Bay Temple. Many of us have often wondered what could be out there, but no one has ever made it there because of how treacherous the water can get. They say when that something happens at the temple, then something bad will befall the Zora descendant who's been protecting the temple. Do you catch my drift? I get what you're saying.
I answered. In truth, I wasn't entirely sure if his story checked out since it was a rumor, but since I hadn't asked anyone else, his story was the only lead I had, so taking it for granted would be foolish of me.
And lately, Lulu has been looking kind of weird. Maybe Lulu's the what? Maybe she could be the guardian of Great Bay Temple. Seriously? Like I said, Miko, it's just a rumor I've heard.
Double Diamond said.
I don't even know if it's true or not. I really shouldn't be saying things about Lulu behind her back, and of course you and her have no secrets between you. Don't tell Lulu that I've been saying stuff about her. Anyway, why don't you find out what's going on with the others? We need to practice if we're going to be prepared for the carnival tomorrow night.
Taking my leave but not before giving Double Diamond a high five much to his pleasure, I stepped outside, walked over to the water's edge, and sat down with my legs in the water before beginning to think. No doubt the third giant was somewhere inside of this Great Bay Temple, and if what Double Diamond said was true, how was I supposed to get there? It's not like I could swim there, as the water would be dangerous, and combined with those underwater monsters, I'd likely end up dying out there. I also had to rescue the Zora eggs from the Gerudo pirates in addition to getting to the temple. Both of these tasks were monumental in scope, and it felt like I was being weighed down by so much pressure, I thought it was going to consume me from the inside out. Stress was something I just couldn't deal with, and even with the ability to slow down time, there was a lot being asked of me and with little in the way of assistance. Tackling both problems at once would do me in, but perhaps handling them one at a time was a better approach. Saving those eggs was more important due to being able to reach the pirates' fortress as opposed to the temple.
That was some good information we got from Double Diamond.
Twilight.
Yeah, but could what he have said been false? Perhaps yet we need to investigate just in case. Why don't we speak to another of the band members?
I asked.
Maybe they can shed some light on things. It's worth a try.
Getting up, I walked over to the next door. The Zora standing in front of it moved aside allowing me access, and went inside only to bump my face into a giant balloon. I thought I had walked into one of Pinky's hidden party balloons, but I deduced that was impossible since that wasn't her personality in this world. Brushing the balloon aside, I walked into another one, and pushed that aside before I found myself staring at several balloons of various shapes and sizes scattered about. Whoever reside in this room obviously had an obsession, though they surprising fit in with the tone of the room. In front of me was a lanky-looking Zora with an unusual hairstyle wielding what looked to be a lobster for an instrument. He appeared pretty laid back given how he was slouching and seemed to be oblivious to my presence. That soon changed when I walked forward and collided with another balloon. I had every mind to pop it and the rest, but the Zora raised his hand and stopped me.
Miko! Don't pop my precious balloons. You know they give my room a major uplift. Aren't you party favor?
Twilight asked, causing both me and the Zora to react in a confused stupor.
Why would I be called an accessory to a shindig? Can you excuse me for a moment?
I asked. I turned my attention to Princess Twilight.
Who is party favor and why would he be called that? He's from the same village that Starlight and Double Diamond come from. Does he have an obsession with balloons?
Princess Twilight nodded.
He has the uncanny ability to take any balloon and create a sculpture out it, like a bridge or a pair of binoculars.
I stared at Her Highness with an expression that screamed,
I don't believe what you just said.
And she ignored it.
I know it's hard to believe, but not even Pinky could create something like a bridge by using a couple of balloons he happened to have on him. Still, I am surprised that he is here of all places and is a member of the Indigogos. Anything else you have to say about him? No. Like Double Diamond, I don't know much about party favor apart from what I just said. Maybe I should do the talking.
Princess Twilight nodded and flew behind my head, leaving me to deal with party favor. He didn't seem happy about how we were talking about him while he was within earshot, but he quickly changed his tune, not literally, when he began strumming his instrument.
A guy might think he isn't appreciated. Sorry about that. It don't bother me none.
Party favor said.
What's important is that you've come back, Miko. Where have you been? I'm all, like, hey, where's Miko? The concert's coming up soon and we aren't even prepared for our rehearsal, so how are we supposed to perform at the carnival when we can't even get our act together?
Much like it was with Double Diamond, the fact that the concert had been cancelled wasn't known to party favor. I had a feeling that this was going to be true with the remaining band members.
And now our band leader has pulled a vanishing act. Evans all holed up in her room just writing songs.
That explained something, but I needed to know more.
What about Lulu? Lulu? She just stands out back staring at the sea. She doesn't even respond when you talk to her no matter what you say. To be honest with you, Miko, I feel like I'm being cast aside by her and that just ain't fair to me. I mean, what have I ever done to deserve the silent treatment? If it wasn't for the fact that we're all part of the same band that has performed together for so long, I'd have upped and left you all.
Party favor then strummed a loud chord that caused one of his balloons to pop, leaving him feeling dejected.
One of my balloons just popped and it was one of my favorites. Maybe you should calm down,
I suggested.
No need to lose your cool.
Party favor got worse.
Calm down? If Lulu would speak to me instead of remain silent then I'd be fine, but instead she don't say anything and Evan refuses to flat out say anything either no matter how much you try to butter her up.
He raised his instrument and appeared to be wanting to smash it on the ground, but instead he lowered it, strummed a more somber chord, and sighed.
If you guys think it's just cause Lulu's not interested in me, I'd understand completely, but I'm telling you, it looks like something's really wrong. Miko, are you in on this too?
I shook my head.
What? No. Is there something you're trying to hide from me? I said no. I'm not running an inquiry or anything. Then just drop it. Okay, I'll stop with the accusations, but I just wish you guys would let me in on what's going on.
Party favor said.
But, look. If we don't start rehearsing real soon, we're not gonna be ready for the concert. Why don't you talk to Evan? If anyone can get her talking, it's you. I'll remain here working on our little project as always. You know the one, right? I hope we can make something of it instead of relying on her songs all the time.
It was clear that both Double Diamond and Party Favor weren't happy with the way things were going with the band. Despite knowing a few more pieces of information, I still didn't understand the entire picture. I needed to speak to the band leader, Evan. If anyone was going to tell me anything, it was going to be her. Leaving Party Favor's room, I was about to head to the next door when I noticed someone on the opposite side of the pond. It was Azora wearing what looked to be a beautiful blue gown, yet her face reminded me of someone but I couldn't tell due to her being too far away. She appeared to be looking in my direction as though she were fixated on me before turning around and walking past a wall, disappearing in the process. Even though I wanted to speak to Evan, I felt compelled to follow this Zora and find out what her deal was. I began to run around the pool to the other side only to discover a second entrance to Zora Hall, though it was much smaller than the main entrance I used to enter. Perhaps this entrance acted more like a back door, as in a way of getting outside without having to deal with adoring fans. Princess Twilight wanted to know what I was doing, and when I told her that I was following a female Zora, she agreed with my decision. I actually thought she was going to argue with me and insist that we go back and speak with Evan, so I was surprised she believed my actions were appropriate. There was an additional door near the back entrance, but I ignored it in favor of pursuing the Zora. When I got back outside, I could see that the sun was mere moments from peering up from the east, signaling the start of the final day, yet I was mesmerized by the sight that was standing before me. A large island featuring a palm tree on top stood out as an unusual landmark, yet I could sense a strange power flowing from it. Whatever this power was, I couldn't even begin to understand the significance behind it. I could also see the Great Bay Temple far off in the distance, and it featured a mysterious cloud covering it in a blanket of deep fog that also radiated great power. Turning to my right, my entire body came to a stop upon seeing the female Zora from before, yet it was her face that gave me the biggest shock of all. 1. This is the actual inscription used in the game. End of chapter.